In the heart of drought-stricken farmland, where hopes wither like unwatered crops, fate was about to weave an extraordinary tale. Tom Miller's weathered hands had spent decades coaxing life from stubborn soil, but nothing prepared him for the faint cries echoing from an abandoned well that autumn morning. What followed was a rescue that would test every ounce of his courage, a desperate race against time as he lowered himself into the darkness to save a terrified baby girl. Little did he know that this child belonged to Sarah Chen, a reclusive billionaire whose wealth could reshape entire communities. As he cradled the infant in his modest farmhouse, treating her scraped knees with trembling hands, a convoy of black SUVs was already cutting through the dusty horizon toward his property. Could this chance encounter between a struggling farmer and a powerful billionaire mother transform not just two lives, but an entire community? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Tom Miller's calloused fingers traced the worn edges of his grandfather's pocket watch, its gold surface dulled by generations of careful handling. Every morning for 40 years, he'd checked the time on this family heirloom before heading out to his fields, just as his father and grandfather had done before him. The watch's gentle ticking seemed to echo the heartbeat of the farm itself, steady, persistent, yet increasingly fragile. Dawn hadn't quite broken over the eastern horizon when Tom stepped onto his front porch, coffee mug in hand. The autumn air carried a bitter chill that seemed to mirror his mounting concerns. His eyes swept across the parched fields, where stunted cornstalks stood as stark reminders of the region's worst drought in 50 years. The irrigation system, now more rust than metal, had finally given up 3 months ago, and the replacement costs might as well have been $1 million for all he could afford them. "Dad!" Emma's voice carried from inside the farmhouse. "The bank called again." Tom's shoulders tensed as his 17-year-old daughter stepped out onto the porch, clutching another notice in her hand. She shouldn't have to deal with this, he thought, watching her tuck a strand of sandy blonde hair behind her ear, the same color her mother's had been. Since Catherine's passing 5 years ago, Emma had shouldered far too many adult responsibilities, becoming both student and unofficial farm accountant. "I'll handle it, sweetheart," he said, taking the notice without looking at it. He already knew what it would say. Third warning this month. The numbers danced in his head. Mortgage payments, equipment repairs, seed costs for next season. If there was a next season. Emma leaned against the porch railing, her eyes carrying wisdom beyond her years. Mrs. Henderson from the bank mentioned something about restructuring options. "Maybe we should consider—" "We're not selling," Tom cut in, gentler than he meant. "To this land. It's more than dirt and crops, Emma. It's every sacrifice your grandparents made, every dream your mother and I shared. It's your childhood, running through the cornfields, learning to drive the tractor." He pulled out the pocket watch, its familiar weight anchoring him to his resolve. "We'll find a way. We always have." The morning routine unfolded like a well-worn book. Tom checked the ancient well pump. It would need replacing soon, too, while Emma prepared for school. The farm's lone working tractor coughed to life reluctantly, protesting another day of service. As he worked the fields, Tom couldn't help but notice how the morning sun cast long shadows through the sparse crops, like nature itself was pointing out the gaps in his dreams. By mid-morning, the temperature had climbed enough to draw sweat despite the autumn chill. Tom paused to rest against the tractor's wheel, unfolding the bank notice he'd stuffed in his pocket. The words seemed to blur together. "Final notice, payment required, foreclosure proceedings." His chest tightened. How had it come to this? The Miller farm had weathered the Great Depression, multiple droughts, and countless market downturns. But this time felt different. The sound of a car engine drew his attention. Emma's old Chevy kicked up dust as she headed to school, the back window sporting her hopeful college stickers, dreams that Tom feared might remain just that. She'd been talking about agricultural science programs, determined to modernize the farm someday. The thought brought both pride and pain. She deserved every opportunity, but the cost of college seemed as distant as rain clouds on the horizon. Tom returned to the farmhouse for lunch, his boots leaving dusty prints on the worn linoleum floor. Catherine's touches were still everywhere. The hand-sewn curtains, the collection of rooster figurines on the windowsill, the recipe cards written in her neat handwriting. He made a simple sandwich, eating at the kitchen table while reviewing the farm's books for the 100th time. The afternoon mail brought more warnings. Overdue equipment payments, a notice from the seed supplier, and a letter from the county about water usage restrictions. Tom stacked them neatly beside the others, a paper tower of mounting pressure. He thought about his father's words from years ago. A farmer's wealth isn't in his wallet, son. It's in the soil beneath his feet and the sky above his head. But even the richest soil needed water, and the sky had been stingy with its gifts. As evening approached, Tom walked the property's fence line, an old habit that helped him think. The setting sun painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, a beautiful backdrop to his troubled thoughts. Near the north corner, he passed the old well, long since replaced by more modern systems, now covered with a heavy iron lid. Something about its dark silhouette against the darkening sky made him pause. He'd been meaning to properly seal it for years, but like so many things, it had waited while more pressing needs took precedence. Emma's headlights appeared on the dirt road, signaling her return from school. Tom headed back to the house, his grandfather's watch marking time in his pocket. Tomorrow would be another day of fighting against nature, economics, and time itself. But tonight, as the stars began to appear above his family's land, he held on to hope, thin as a corn silk and just as fragile. Walking up the porch steps, Tom heard the distant rumble of thunder. Maybe, just maybe, the rain would finally come. The promised rain never came. Instead, the next morning arrived with a heavy mist that clung to the ground like a threadbare blanket, turning the world grey and indistinct. Tom had just finished his first cup of coffee when he heard it. A sound, so faint he thought he'd imagined it. He lowered his mug, tilting his head to listen. There it came again. A cry, distant and muffled, like a kitten lost in the fog. But something about it raised the hair on the back of his neck. This wasn't the sound of any animal he knew. "Emma!" he called out, but the house remained silent. She'd left early for a student council meeting, her empty cereal bowl still in the sink. The cry came again, clearer this time, and Tom's heart skipped a beat. It was a baby's wail. There was no mistaking it now. He grabbed his jacket and flashlight, stepping out into the misty morning. The sound seemed to be coming from the north end of the property. As he walked, his pace quickening with each step, memories of raising Emma flooded back, her midnight cries, the particular way a baby's distress could trigger something primal in an adult's brain. The old well came into view through the fog, its rusted iron cover a dark circle against the pale ground. Tom's blood ran cold as another cry echoed up from beneath it. "Dear God," he whispered, dropping to his knees beside the well. The heavy cover, which he'd meant to weld, shut years. Ego had been shifted slightly askew. With trembling hands, Tom pulled out his phone, but the screen showed no signal, a common problem in the far corners of his property. He couldn't wait for help. The cries were getting weaker. The iron cover groaned as he dragged it aside. Dropping to his stomach, Tom shone his flashlight down into the darkness. About 20 feet below, he caught a glimpse of something pink against the well's stone walls. A tiny hand moved. "Hold on!" he called down, his voice echoing in the narrow space. "I'm coming!" The baby's cry strengthened briefly at the sound of his voice, then subsided into whimpers. Tom ran back to his truck, mind racing. The well was too narrow for him to climb down normally. He'd need rope and plenty of it. He'd also need something to help him bring the baby up safely. In the truck's toolbox, he found a length of sturdy rope he used for towing. From the barn, he grabbed Emma's old baby carrier, the one Catherine had insisted on keeping just in case. Back at the well, Tom worked with desperate efficiency. He tied one end of the rope to his truck's tow hitch, testing it with several hard yanks. The other end he fashioned into a harness around his chest and waist, the way his father had taught him for emergency repairs in grain silos. The baby carrier he modified quickly, cutting away the unnecessary straps and creating a simple basket that he could control from above. This he tied to a separate length of rope. Both lines disappeared into the darkness as he fed them down the well. "I'm coming down now," he called, hoping his voice would keep the baby calm. "Just hold on, little one." The endearment came naturally, though his heart ached at the thought of how the infant had ended up here. Tom sat on the well's edge, legs dangling into darkness. The flashlight secured to his belt cast a narrow beam into the depths. With a deep breath, he began his descent. The walls of the well were damp and cold against his back as he slowly rappelled down. The old stones laid by his grandfather's generation were surprisingly solid, though slick with moss and age. Every few feet he called out soft reassurances, as much to calm himself as the baby. About halfway down, his foot slipped on a wet stone, sending a shower of pebbles into the darkness. The baby's frightened cry galvanized him. "Shh, it's okay," he soothed, steadying himself. Almost there. Finally, his boots touched the shallow water at the bottom of the well. In the flashlight's beam, he saw her clearly for the first time. A baby girl, perhaps 8 or 9 months old, dressed in what had once been an expensive-looking pink outfit, now soiled and torn. She was wedged in a small, natural alcove in the well's wall, which had probably saved her life. Her dark eyes, wide with fear, fixed on Tom's face. "Hey there, sweetheart," he said softly, reaching for her with careful movements. "Let's get you out of here." The baby didn't resist as he gently lifted her into his arms. She felt cold, but was moving normally, a good sign. Holding her close to share his warmth, Tom quickly secured her in the modified carrier. "Okay, little one, up you go." He began raising the carrier line slowly, keeping one hand on it to prevent any swinging. The baby remained remarkably quiet now, as if sensing the importance of staying still. When the carrier reached the top, Tom tied off the rope to hold it secure. Now came the harder part. His arms were already tired from the descent, and the climb back up would be challenging. The stones seemed more slippery than before, and several times he had to stop, pressing his back hard against one wall and his feet against the other to rest. Near the top, a stone crumbled under his foot, leaving him hanging by the rope for a heart-stopping moment before he found new purchase. Finally, his hands gripped the well's edge. With a last surge of effort, Tom pulled himself out and crawled to where the baby carrier waited. The little girl looked up at him, her face dirty but remarkably calm. As Tom lifted her into his arms, she reached up to touch his cheek with a tiny hand, as if thanking him. He cradled her close, his eyes welling with tears of relief and lingering. "Adrenaline! Let's get you somewhere warm," he whispered, wrapping her in his jacket. As he carried her back toward the farmhouse, the morning mist began to lift, revealing a transformed world. Neither of them could know it yet, but with each step, Tom carried not just a child to safety, but his family's future toward a new dawn. The walk back to the farmhouse seemed to take forever, each step measured and careful, as Tom cradled the rescued baby against his chest. The old rope that had helped save her life now hung coiled over his shoulder, its rough fibers damp with water and sweat, a humble hero's medal. His muscles ached from the climb, but the warm weight in his arms kept him moving forward. Inside the kitchen, Tom's hands trembled as he reached for Catherine's old first aid kit. How many times had she patched up Emma's scrapes and bruises at this very table? The baby watched him with serious dark eyes as he gently cleaned the mud from her face with a warm washcloth. She didn't cry or fuss, but her tiny fingers clutched the edge of his flannel shirt, as if afraid he might disappear. "You're quite the brave one, aren't you?" he murmured, carefully checking her for injuries. The pink dress she wore was made of fine material, silk maybe, though now it was stained and torn. A small gold bracelet circled her wrist, engraved with Chinese characters Tom couldn't read. This was no ordinary lost child. His phone, still, showed no signal, typical for foggy mornings, but the landline worked. Tom dialed 911 while keeping one hand on the baby, who had started to doze against his chest, exhausted from her ordeal. "This is the sheriff's office," a familiar voice answered. "Betty speaking." "Betty, it's Tom Miller out on Route 7. He said, his voice rougher than usual. "I need help out here. I just pulled a baby girl out of my old well." There was a moment of stunned silence. "Dear Lord, Tom, is she? She's alive. Seems okay, but she needs checking over. And Betty, this isn't... She's not from around here. Her clothes, her jewelry, someone's looking for her, someone with money." "Stay put," Betty ordered. "I'm sending Doc Wilson and Deputy Hayes right. And now, don't try to drive her in yourself. That fog's getting worse." As Tom hung up, he noticed the baby had started shivering. He grabbed the old quilt from the living room couch, another of Catherine's handiworks, and wrapped it around them both as he settled into his recliner. The baby snuggled closer, her dark hair tickling his chin. "Your mama must be worried sick," he whispered, running through scenarios in his mind. Had there been an accident on the highway, a kidnapping? The nearest town was 30 miles away, and visitors rarely strayed out this far unless they were lost. The sound of tires on gravel brought Tom back to the present. Through the window, he saw Doc Wilson's old station wagon pulling up, followed by a patrol car. The baby stirred at the noise but didn't cry, her fingers still tangled in his shirt. Doc Wilson burst in first, medical bag in hand, his round face flushed from hurrying. "Tom, where is she?" Betty said. He stopped short at the sight of them. In the recliner, his expert eyes already assessing the situation. "Let's have a look at our little explorer," Doc said softly, approaching with the gentle manner that had made him the county's favorite physician for 3 decades. Deputy Hayes followed, notebook in hand, his young face serious. The examination was mercifully quick. The baby cooperated as if she'd known Doc Wilson all her life, only whimpering once when he checked a small scrape on her knee. "She's remarkable," Doc announced finally. "Some bruises, mild hypothermia, but nothing serious. She's what, 8, 9 months old? Strong little thing. Any sign of how she got there?" Deputy Hayes asked, scribbling notes. Tom shook his head. "No footprints in the mud except mine. With the fog, they could have come from anywhere. That well's been covered since my father's time, but the lid wasn't properly sealed. I've been meaning to..." His voice caught. The what-ifs suddenly overwhelming. "Stop that right now, Tom Miller," Doc Wilson said firmly, reading his expression. "You're not responsible for someone else's actions, and you just saved this child's life. Focus on that." The baby had dozed off, again one hand still gripping Tom's shirt. Even in sleep, she seemed unwilling to let go of her rescuer. Deputy Hayes stepped closer, examining the gold bracelet on her tiny wrist. "These are Chinese characters," he said, surprising them. "My sister married a guy from Shanghai. This looks like a name, maybe. And there's something else engraved. Here, looks like a company logo." As if on cue, the sound of multiple vehicles approaching cut through the morning quiet. Through the fog, they could make out several black SUVs turning into the farm's driveway, their headlights cutting through the mist like searchlights. "Well," Doc Wilson said quietly, "I believe we're about to get some answers." Tom instinctively held the baby closer as Deputy Hayes moved to the door, one hand on his holster. The vehicle stopped in a precise formation, and the doors began to open. A woman emerged from the middle SUV, tall, elegant despite obvious distress, her expensive coat incongruous against the muddy farmyard. Her eyes locked onto the baby in Tom's arms, and her composed facade cracked. "Lily," she whispered, her voice carrying across the sudden silence. "Oh God, Lily." The baby stirred at the sound of her mother's voice, her dark eyes opening. Tom felt a complex mix of emotions as he looked down at her, relief that her family had found her, and an unexpected pang at the thought of letting her go. As the woman rushed forward, Flanked by what were obviously security personnel, Tom couldn't help but notice how her features matched the baby's. The same dark eyes, the same determined set to the chin. This was definitely Lily's mother, though how they had ended up separated with the baby in his well remained a mystery. Deputy Hayes stepped aside, recognizing from the woman's bearing and her entourage that this was someone of significance. She stopped just inside the door, her eyes taking in the scene. The first aid supplies on the table, the muddy rope on the floor, the way her daughter clutched Tom's shirt even in sleep. "You saved her," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You went down into that well and saved my baby." Tom stood carefully, mindful of the sleeping child. "Ma'am," he said simply, "anyone would have done the same." But looking at the woman's face, at the way she studied the mud on his clothes, the raw scrapes on his hands, the gentle way he held her daughter, they both knew that wasn't true. Not everyone would have heard those faint cries through the fog. Not everyone would have had the courage or the skill to make that descent. Not everyone would have known how to comfort a frightened baby afterward. As he carefully transferred Lily to her mother's arms, Tom saw tears in the woman's eyes. The baby stirred but didn't cry, one small hand reaching out to touch her mother's cheek in the same way she had touched Tom's after the rescue. "I'm Sarah Chen," the woman said, holding her daughter close, "and I believe I owe you everything." The farmhouse kitchen had never felt quite so crowded. Security personnel hovered near the doors while Doc Wilson finished his examination of Lily, now cradled in her mother's arms. Tom stood by the sink, feeling oddly out of place in his own home, as he watched Sarah Chen gently stroke her daughter's hair, whispering soft words in Chinese. The handmade baby blanket, Emma's old one that he'd used to warm Lily, still lay across his chair. Its faded pink flowers and careful stitching seemed to belong to another world entirely, compared to the crisp black suits and earpieces of Sarah's security team. "Mrs. Chen," Doc Wilson said, closing his medical bag, "your daughter is remarkably, well considering. Mr. Miller's quick action prevented any serious complications from the cold and damp. I'd still recommend a full checkup at the hospital, but she's showing no signs of distress." Sarah nodded, her composed exterior barely containing the emotion underneath. "I have a medical team standing by in town, but please, tell me exactly. What happened? How did you find her?" Tom cleared his throat, suddenly aware of his mud-stained clothes and work-worn appearance. "I heard crying, ma'am, through the morning fog. At first I thought it might be a trapped animal, but—" He described the rescue, trying to downplay the danger, but Deputy Hayes, who had been taking notes, interjected. "That well's a good 20 feet deep, Mrs. Chen. What Mr. Miller did, going down there alone in those conditions, it wasn't just brave, it was darned near miraculous." Sarah's dark eyes fixed on Tom, really seeing him for the first time. Her gaze took in his scraped hands, the rope burns on his forearms, the exhaustion lined in his face. "You risked your life for a stranger's child," she said softly. "Like I said before, anyone would have—" "No," she cut him off, her voice firm. "Not anyone. I've learned that lesson too well." Something dark flickered across her face, quickly hidden. "Mr. Miller, I'd like to understand exactly how Lily ended up here. Would you show me the well?" One of her security team stepped forward. "Mrs. Chen, given the situation, perhaps we should—" "James," she said quietly, "this man just climbed down a well to save my daughter. I think I'm safe in his company." She turned to Doc Wilson. "Would you mind holding Lily for a moment?" The old doctor took the baby with practiced ease, and Lily settled against him without protest, though her eyes followed her mother. Tom led Sarah out onto the porch, where the fog had finally begun to lift, revealing the expanse of his struggling farm. They walked in silence toward the well, their footsteps leaving parallel tracks in the damp earth. Sarah moved with unexpected sureness across the uneven ground, her expensive boots somehow avoiding the worst of the mud. When they reached the well, she stopped, staring down at the dark opening and the heavy iron cover lying beside it. 20 feet, she whispered, then looked at Tom. "Did you even hesitate?" "No, ma'am. Sarah, please." She knelt, touching the well's stone edge. "These stones are old. My grandfather's work. He dug this well by hand, back in the 30s. Tom watched as she examined the ground around the well, her movements methodical and precise. "There are tire tracks here," she said, pointing to faint marks in the mud. "Recent ones, not from your rescue operation." She stood, brushing off her hands. "Mr. Miller." Tom. She smiled slightly, the first he'd seen. "I need to be honest with you. Lily's presence here was no accident. We were staying at the Golden Pine Resort, about 30 miles from here. This morning I woke to find her gone from her crib. The resort's security cameras showed someone carrying her to a car around 4 a.m. Tom's blood ran cold. A kidnapping? Sarah's face hardened. An attempt. They probably planned to contact me with demands. But something must have spooked them. Maybe they saw the police response, or realized they were in over their heads." She looked back at the well, her composure cracking slightly. "So they just—" "Mrs. Chen, Sarah," Tom said gently. "She's safe now. That's what matters." She nodded, taking a deep breath. "Do you have children, Tom? A daughter?" "Emma. She's 17 now." "Then you understand. The terror of almost losing a child, the gratitude when someone saves them." She turned to face him fully. "I owe you a debt I can never repay, but I'd like to try." Back at the farmhouse, they found Emma had arrived home from school. She stood in the kitchen doorway, staring wide-eyed at the scene before her. Doc Wilson cradling a baby, security personnel by the doors, Deputy Hayes still taking notes. "Dad!" she called uncertainly. "It's okay, sweetheart," Tom said, following Sarah inside. "We've had an eventful morning." He quickly introduced Emma to Sarah, watching as his daughter's expression shifted from confusion to awe as she realized who their guest was. "You saved her baby?" Emma asked, looking at her father with pride. Lily chose that moment to reach out toward Tom, making small grabbing motions with her hands. Without thinking, he stepped forward, and Doc Wilson transferred her to his arms. The baby immediately snuggled against his chest, her small fingers finding their familiar grip on his shirt. Sarah watched this interaction with an unreadable expression. "She trusts you," she said softly. "Lily's usually very shy with strangers. But then, you're not really a stranger anymore, are you?" Emma had moved closer, smiling at the baby. "She's beautiful," she said. "Can I—" Sarah nodded, and Emma gently stroked Lily's dark hair. The baby turned to look at her, offering a drowsy smile that made everyone in the room catch their breath. "The hospital team will be waiting." "James, the security chief," reminded Sarah quietly. "Yes, of course." Sarah reached for her daughter, and this time Lily went willingly, though she kept her eyes on Tom. "We need to go, but this isn't goodbye. Tom, Emma, I'd like to come back tomorrow, if that's all right. There's much more we need to discuss." As the group prepared to leave, Sarah paused in the doorway. "Tom, thank you, not just for saving her, but for caring for her afterward, for making her feel safe." She glanced around the modest farmhouse, taking in the worn furniture, the carefully mended curtains, the family photos on the walls. Sometimes the richest things in life have nothing to do with money. After they'd gone, Emma helped Tom clean up the kitchen. She picked up the old baby blanket, running her fingers over her mother's stitching. "Dad, what do you think she meant about coming back to discuss things?" Tom looked out the window, watching the convoy of black SUVs disappear down his dusty driveway. "I don't know, sweetheart, but I have a feeling our lives are about to change." The old pocket watch ticked steadily in his pocket, marking the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. Outside, the autumn sun finally broke through, the last of the morning fog, casting long shadows across fields that suddenly held new promise. The next morning arrived with a clarity that made the previous day's fog seem like a distant dream. Tom rose before dawn, as always, but today his routine felt different. He found himself straightening pictures in the living room, wiping down the already clean kitchen counter, and even considering moving the threadbare armchair that had been Catherine's favorite from its place by the window. "Dad, stop fussing," Emma said, coming downstairs in her school clothes. "The house is fine. It's lived in, real." She paused, watching him adjust a couch cushion. "You're nervous about Mrs. Chen coming back, aren't you?" Before Tom could answer, the distant sound of vehicles drew their attention. Through the kitchen window, they watched the now familiar convoy of black SUVs approaching, their polished surfaces catching the morning light. But today, something else followed them. A large truck with commercial plates. "That's Wallace's Irrigation," Emma said, recognizing the local company's logo. "What are they doing here?" Tom stepped onto the porch, his grandfather's pocket watch, a reassuring weight in his hand. The vehicles parked in a practiced formation, and Sarah Chen emerged from the central SUV. Today she wore clothes that, while still obviously expensive, seemed chosen for practicality. Dark slacks, a cashmere, sweater and boots better suited to farmland. Lily was in her arms, wearing overalls that made her look like any farmer's child. "Good morning, Tom," Sarah called, walking toward the house. Lily's face lit up at the sight of him, her small hands reaching out. "Someone insisted on coming to see you." Without thinking, Tom descended the porch steps and took the squirming baby, who immediately grabbed his shirt in her familiar way. "How is she?" "Perfect," Sarah said, her eyes soft as she watched them. "The doctors couldn't find a single thing wrong. You took excellent care of her." She turned to Emma, who hovered uncertainly on the porch. "And good morning to you, Emma. I'm glad you're here. What I have to discuss involves your future too." The Wallace's irrigation truck had parked, and two men in work clothes were consulting documents on a clipboard. Sarah noticed Tom watching them. "I hope you don't mind," she said. "I took the liberty of asking them to come out, but let's talk inside first." In the kitchen, Emma made coffee. Their good coffee, the kind they saved for special occasions. Sarah accepted a cup gracefully, settling at the old oak table while Lily played contentedly in Tom's lap. Through the window they could see more vehicles arriving, a surveyor's truck, a soil testing team, and what looked like agricultural consultants. "I'll be direct," Sarah said, placing an elegant leather portfolio on the table. "Yesterday, after we'd left, I had my team do some research. This farm has been in your family for 4 generations. Your grandfather dug that well himself during the Depression. Your father modernized the irrigation system in the 70s. You and your late wife, I'm so sorry for your loss. You specialized in organic crops before it was popular." She met Tom's surprised look. "Yes, I did my homework. Catherine Miller was ahead of her time with sustainable farming practices." Tom's hand tightened on his coffee cup. "She was. But the drought these past few years, and the costs of maintaining—" "I know about the bank notices," Sarah said gently, "the equipment loans, the water rights issues." She opened her portfolio, revealing detailed financial documents. "I also know that despite these challenges, you've managed to keep this farm producing at 60% capacity. That's remarkable given your resources." Emma leaned forward. "How do you know all this?" Sarah smiled. "I should properly introduce myself. I'm the CEO of Chen Sustainable Technologies. We develop and implement agricultural solutions for climate change challenges, drought-resistant crops, water conservation systems, soil rehabilitation." She looked at Tom. "What you and Catherine started here, we're doing it on a global scale." Tom felt a flutter of hope, quickly suppressed by years of practical farming sense. "That sounds impressive, but I don't see—" "I want to invest in your farm," Sarah said simply. "Not buy it, invest in it. Modern irrigation, soil treatments, new equipment, a testing ground for our latest agricultural innovations." She reached out, touching the portfolio. "But more than that, I want to build a community agricultural center here. Teaching facilities, demonstration fields, research areas, a place where other farmers can learn sustainable practices." The kitchen fell silent except for Lily's happy babbling as she played with Tom's watch chain. Emma spoke first, her voice barely containing her excitement. "You mean like an agricultural education center?" "Exactly." Sarah's eyes sparkled. "I understand you're interested in agricultural science, Emma. There would be internship opportunities, research positions. She turned back to Tom. Your experience, your family's legacy, combined with our resources and technology. Think of the possibilities. Tom looked down at Lily, who smiled up at him with complete trust. Why? He asked quietly. There are bigger farms, more successful operations. Why us? Sarah was quiet for a moment, watching her daughter in Tom's arms. Yesterday morning, I thought I'd lost everything that mattered. Money, power, influence, none of it meant anything. When Lily was missing. But you, she took a deep breath. You didn't know who she was, who I was. You just heard a baby crying and went down into the darkness to save her. That kind of character, that's what I want to invest in. She stood, walking to the window. The morning sun illuminated her face as she watched the various teams beginning their surveys of the farm. I believe everything happens for a reason, Tom. Lily ending up here, of all places. Maybe it was fate showing us both a new path. Emma touched her father's arm. Dad, this could save the farm. More than that, it could make it everything Mom dreamed of. Tom gently detached Lily's fingers from his watch chain, remembering all the times he'd checked it over the years, marking the slow decline of his family's legacy. But now, looking at the baby in his arms, at his daughter's hopeful face, at Sarah's quiet confidence, he felt time shifting in a new direction. What exactly are you proposing? He asked. Sarah returned to the table, pulling out detailed plans. A partnership. Your land, your expertise, our resources. We'll clear the debts, modernize the equipment, implement new irrigation systems. The community center will provide additional income streams. You'll retain ownership and operational control with our company as investment partners. She smiled. And I suspect Lily will insist on regular visits to check on progress. As if on cue, the baby reached up and patted Tom's cheek, drawing laughs from everyone. Outside, the morning sun caught the dew on his fields, making them sparkle. With possibility, the steady tick of his grandfather's watch seemed to beat in time with a future he hadn't dared to imagine. The next few days brought a whirlwind of activity to the Miller farm. Tom found himself navigating between two distinct worlds that seemed to orbit each other like binary stars. His familiar rural life and Sarah Chen's universe of corporate efficiency. The contrast was never more apparent than during their first official business meeting, held right there in his kitchen. Sarah had arrived with her team of executives, their laptops and tablets creating an odd tableau against Catherine's hand-embroidered curtains. Tom sat at his end of the oak table, where 4 generations of Millers had eaten their daily bread, now covered with spreadsheets and professional presentations. He'd put on his Sunday shirt, the one without any patches, but still felt distinctly out of place in his own home. These projections show a 300% increase in yield within the first 2 years, a young analyst was saying, sliding a glossy chart across the table. With the implementation of our drought-resistant seed variants and smart irrigation systems. Begging your pardon, Tom interrupted, his calloused finger tapping the paper, but these numbers assume perfect conditions. Out here, we deal with real soil, real weather. Nature doesn't read spreadsheets. A silence fell over the room. The analyst looked uncertainly at Sarah, who had been quietly observing while bouncing Lily on her knee. To everyone's surprise, she laughed, a warm, genuine sound that made her daughter giggle in response. And that, gentlemen, she said to her team, is exactly why we're here. All our technology means nothing without Mr. Miller's generations of hands-on experience. She handed Lily to Tom. The baby had been reaching, for him anyway, and stood to address the room. We're not here to replace traditional farming wisdom. We're here to enhance it. After the meeting, Sarah lingered behind as her team packed up their presentations and tablets. She watched Tom showing Lily the family photos on the wall, naming each weathered face in a soft voice. The baby seemed fascinated by a particular picture of Tom's father, standing proudly beside their first tractor. You don't trust us completely yet, Sarah said. It wasn't a question. Tom turned, shifting Lily to his hip with practiced ease. It's not about trust, it's about understanding. These fields, they're not just dirt and crops. They're family, she finished. From her designer handbag, she pulled out an elegant business card. But instead of handing it to him, she walked to the refrigerator. With a small magnet shaped like a rooster, another of Catherine's touches, she secured the card next to Emma's school schedule and a recipe for Catherine's. Apple pie. My personal number, Sarah explained. Not my office, not my assistant. Me. Day or night, if you have concerns, questions, or just want to tell me I'm moving too fast, call. Tom studied the card. The paper was thick, expensive, the elegant, lettering a stark contrast to the handwritten notes and shopping lists surrounding it. That's quite an offer from a CEO. No, Sarah said softly, reaching to take Lily, who had dozed off against Tom's shoulder. That's quite an offer from a mother whose child you saved. The CEO just happens to have the resources to show her gratitude. Later that afternoon, Emma returned from school to find her father sitting on the porch, staring at the teams of workers already beginning soil surveys in the north field. She settled beside him, homework forgotten. I heard some girls talking. About us at school today, she said. About Mrs. Chen's visits. Apparently she's kind of famous. They said she's on some Forbes list or something. Tom nodded slowly. Your mother would have liked her, I think. She's real, despite all the money and power. Reminds me a bit of Catherine, actually. Same kind of quiet strength. Emma pulled out her phone, showing him a news article about Chen's sustainable technologies. The photo showed Sarah in a sleek office, looking every inch the powerful CEO. It's weird to think that's the same person who sat in our kitchen feeding Lily Cheerios this morning. A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the distant sound of the survey equipment. Finally, Emma spoke again, her voice careful. Dad, are you okay with all this? It's happening so fast. Tom pulled out his grandfather's watch, its worn surface catching the afternoon light. Your great-grandfather bought this watch the year he dug that well. Story goes, he had to choose between the watch and a new plow. Everyone thought he was crazy, buying something so impractical when the farm needed tools. Why did he do it? He said a man needs something to remind him that time moves forward, not back. That change isn't always comfortable, but it's always coming. Tom smiled, tucking the watch away. I think he'd approve of what's happening here. The next morning, Tom found a package on his porch, a sleek laptop computer with a note in Sarah's elegant handwriting. For virtual meetings, don't worry, Emma can teach you how to use it. Below that, in less formal script, Lily says hi. Inside the laptop case was a photo he hadn't noticed being taken. Tom in his work clothes, sitting in Catherine's old armchair, showing Lily the pocket watch. The baby's face was lit with wonder, one tiny hand reaching for the golden surface. While Tom smiled down at her with grandfatherly affection, he set the photo on his desk next to the one of Catherine. Two worlds, slowly merging into something new. Outside, the morning sun caught the dew on his fields, making them sparkle like the screen of his new laptop, both holding promises of things to come. When Sarah's convoy arrived later that day, there was something different about their approach. The lead SUV slowed near the old oak tree where Emma's tire swing still hung, and Tom could see Lily's face pressed against the window, her small hand waving excitedly. Sarah helped her daughter out of the car, and Lily took her first toddling steps on the farm's soil, her designer clothes already attracting dust. She insisted on wearing overalls today, Sarah said, watching her daughter explore the farmyard. With delighted curiosity. I think she's developing some rural tastes. Tom watched as Lily discovered a dandelion growing near the porch steps, her expression one of pure wonder. Some things about life are the same everywhere, he said. Rich or poor, city or country, watching things grow never gets old. Sarah nodded, a comfortable silence falling between them as they watched Lily investigate her new world. The old pocket watch ticked steadily in Tom's pocket, marking time for a future that seemed to hold more promise with each passing day. The farm's deed lay on the kitchen table between them, its aged paper a testament to generations of Miller family history. Tom's fingers rested lightly on the document, while Sarah's legal team waited patiently, their modern tablets and smartphones, creating a stark contrast to the weathered piece of paper that had guided his family's destiny for nearly a century. "Everything stays in your name," Sarah explained, her voice gentle but firm. "We're not buying the farm, Tom. We're investing in its future and in you." She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a thick folder of documents. "These are the formal partnership papers. I had our lawyers make them as straightforward as possible." Emma sat beside her father, her AP chemistry homework forgotten as she watched this moment unfold. Through the window, they could see Lily playing in the farmyard under the watchful eye of her nanny, chasing butterflies in the autumn sunshine. The baby's laughter carried faintly through the glass, a reminder of how this unlikely partnership had begun. "May I?" Tom asked, reaching for the papers. He might not have a business degree, but 4 decades of handling farm contracts had taught him to read the fine print. Sarah nodded, settling back with an approving smile as he began to study the documents carefully. The terms were more generous than he'd expected. The initial investment would clear all existing debts and fund comprehensive modernization of the farm's infrastructure. Chen's sustainable technologies would provide cutting-edge equipment and technical expertise, while the Millers would retain full operational control. The proposed community agricultural center would be built on the North Field, bringing jobs and educational opportunities to the area. "This profit-sharing arrangement," Tom said, pointing to a particular clause. "It's more than fair to us." Sarah leaned forward. "We're not just investing in the farm, Tom. We're investing in your expertise, your understanding of this land. That has value, significant value." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "When Lily was missing, all my wealth meant nothing. But your knowledge, your courage, your experience, that saved her life. You can't put a price tag on that kind of wisdom." One of the lawyers, a young man who looked like he'd never seen a callus in his life, cleared his throat. "Mrs. Chen insisted on the generous terms, Mr. Miller. She believes your traditional farming methods, combined with our technology, could create a model for sustainable agriculture worldwide." Tom stood up, walking to the window. He watched Lily, playing near the old tractor, her nanny hovering protectively nearby. The baby had found a rusty wrench he'd been meaning to put away and was studying it with serious concentration, just as Emma used to do when she was small. "My father used to say that a farmer's most important crop is the next generation," he said quietly. "Everything we do, every decision we make, it's not just about today's harvest, it's about what we leave behind." He turned back to the table, his eyes finding the deed. "This land has been in my family since the Depression. My grandfather paid for it with crops and sweat and sheer stubbornness." Sarah stood, moving to join him at the window. "And now it's your turn to decide what legacy you'll leave, not just for Emma, but for all the young farmers who could learn here, for all the families who could benefit from what we create together." She smiled as they watched Lily toddle toward the porch, clutching her found treasure. "Sometimes the best way to honor tradition is to help it grow into something new." The screen door creaked open, and Lily burst in, holding up the wrench triumphantly. "Look!" she declared, one of the few words she'd mastered. The nanny followed, apologizing, but Tom was already kneeling down to the baby's level. "That's a number 15 wrench," he told her seriously. "Been looking for that one." Lily beamed, offering it to him with both hands. As he accepted it, she threw her arms around his neck in an impulsive hug. The simple gesture seemed to shift something in the air. Tom stood, still holding the wrench, and walked back to the table. He picked up his grandfather's pocket watch, studying its worn surface for a long moment. Then he reached for the partnership papers. "Emma," he said, "get me a pen, please." His daughter practically flew to his desk, returning with the pen Catherine had given him for their last anniversary. As he prepared to sign, Sarah touched his arm gently. "Are you sure?" she asked. "We can take more time if you need it." Tom shook his head, smiling. "My grandfather bought this watch when everyone told him to buy a plow instead. Said sometimes you have to trust your heart over your ledger book." He signed his name with steady strokes, the same signature that had appeared on every farm document since he was 18 years old. "Besides, I think Lily's already decided this is her second home." The lawyers efficiently processed the paperwork, their movements precise and practiced. When they finished, Sarah dismissed them with a quiet word, leaving just the core group. In the kitchen, Tom, Emma, Sarah, and Lily, who had curled up in Tom's lap with the wrench still clutched in one small hand. "There's one more thing," Sarah said, reaching into her briefcase one last time. She pulled out a small, wrapped package. "This is, well, just open it." Tom carefully undid the elegant wrapping paper, revealing a wooden box. Inside, nestled in velvet, was a gleaming new pocket watch. But this was no ordinary timepiece. The cover bore an intricate engraving of the Miller farm, complete with the old well and the ancient oak tree. Inside, along with the traditional clock face, was a digital display showing weather data, soil conditions, and crop metrics. "It's connected to all the new monitoring systems we'll be installing," Sarah explained. "Old wisdom meets new technology. I thought your grandfather might approve." Tom held the watch in one hand, his grandfather's in the other. Past and future, balanced in his palms. Lily reached out to touch the new watch's shiny surface, leaving a small fingerprint on the gold. "Perfect," Tom said softly. "It's already getting broken in properly." Outside, the afternoon sun painted long shadows across fields that had sustained his family for generations. But now, for the first time in years, those shadows seemed to point toward a future filled with promise rather than worry. The old watch and the new one ticked in harmony, marking the moment when tradition and progress found their common ground on a piece of land that had always been about growing things, crops, families, and now perhaps a whole new way of farming. The modern irrigation plans spread across Tom's new office desk looked like something from NASA, all precise measurements and technical specifications that seemed a world away from his father's old, hand-drawn field maps. But as Sarah walked him through the design, pointing out how each component worked with the natural contours of his land, he began to see the poetry in the engineering. "These soil moisture sensors," she explained, indicating tiny dots scattered across the blueprint. "They'll talk directly to your new watch. You'll know exactly when and where to water down to the square foot." She paused, studying his expression. "What are you thinking?" Tom smiled, touching a spot on the plans. "I'm thinking my grandfather would have loved this. See this ridge? Here? He always said it was the key to understanding how water moved through the whole property. Looks like your computers agree with him." It had been 3 weeks since the partnership papers were signed, and the farm was slowly transforming. New equipment arrived daily, each piece more sophisticated than the last. The old barn now housed a state-of-the-art computer system that monitored everything from soil pH to weather patterns. Yet somehow, these changes felt less like an invasion and more like an evolution. Emma had thrown herself into learning every new system, her natural aptitude for science making her an invaluable bridge between the old and new ways. Tom often found her in the evenings, laptop open, explaining complex agricultural software. To him, with the same patience he'd once used to teach her about planting seasons. "The thing is, Dad," she said one night, showing him how to read the soil analysis reports, "all this technology is just giving us numbers for things you already know by feel, like how you can tell when a field needs water just by grabbing a handful of dirt." The words warmed him, acknowledging that his lifetime of experience wasn't being replaced but enhanced. It was a sentiment Sarah seemed to share, often seeking his input on decisions that her technical team might have considered straightforward. This morning, she'd arrived earlier than usual, Lily practically bouncing with excitement in her arms. The baby had grown notably in the past weeks, her vocabulary expanding to include words like tractor and corn, though they came out more like tack and con. Someone couldn't wait to see her favorite farmer, Sarah said, setting Lily down. The little girl immediately toddled toward Tom's desk, where he scooped her up into his lap. And I wanted to show you the latest satellite imagery of the test plots. The images on her tablet showed the first signs of their experimental drought-resistant corn sprouting in neat rows. The new irrigation system had been operating for just 10 days, but the results were already promising. Traditional wisdom combined with precision technology was proving to be a powerful combination. Your soil restoration technique made the difference, Sarah noted, zooming in on a particularly vibrant section. When you suggested adding that specific blend of cover crops based on what your father used to plant, well, the data confirms what you knew intuitively. Tom bounced Lily on his knee while studying the images. Knowledge is funny that way. Sometimes the old wisdom and the new science are saying the same thing in different languages. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Emma, fresh from school and bubbling with news. "Dad, Mrs. Chen, you have to see this." She pulled up a presentation on her laptop, her submission for the State Agricultural Science Fair. "I've been analyzing the data from our new soil sensors, comparing it with Grandpa's old farming journals. The correlation is incredible." Sarah moved to look over Emma's shoulder, her expression brightening. "This is exceptional work, Emma. Would you consider presenting this at our next board meeting? It perfectly illustrates what we're trying to achieve here." Tom watched his daughter's face light up at the invitation, pride mixing with a touch of pleasant surprise. The Emma of a few months ago would have been too shy to even consider such an opportunity. But like the farm itself, she was blossoming under new possibilities. Outside the office window, the afternoon sun illuminated a landscape in transition. New irrigation pipes traced silver lines across fields that had been in his family for generations. Modern sensors stood like silent sentinels among the growing corn. Near the old oak tree, a team of architects was surveying the site for the Community Agricultural Center. Lily squirmed in Tom's lap, pointing excitedly at a tractor moving across the distant field. "Tack!" she declared proudly. Then, to everyone's surprise, she added a new word. "Home!" Sarah's breath caught audibly. Tom felt his own throat tighten at the simple declaration. Emma looked up from her laptop, a soft smile playing on her face. "You know," Sarah said quietly, "she's not wrong. This place, it's becoming something special for all of us." The sentiment hung in the air, warm and true. The farm had always been more than just land to the Millers, but now it was growing into something bigger, a bridge between past and future, a place where tradition and innovation danced together like wheat in the wind. Later that evening, after Sarah and Lily had left, Tom stood on his porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of promise. He held both watches in his hands, his grandfather's, and the new one Sarah had given him. The old one told him it was 7:15 p.m. The new one told him the soil moisture was optimal, the weather was clear, and tomorrow would bring perfect conditions for the new seedlings. Emma joined him, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Did you ever think," she asked, handing him one, "when you went down that well, that you'd end up here?" Tom shook his head, smiling. "Life's like farming, sweetheart. You never know quite what's going to sprout from the seeds you plant." He sipped his coffee, watching the last light fade from the western sky. "But sometimes, if you're lucky, it grows into something better than you could have imagined." Inside his pocket, both watches ticked in harmony, counting out the moments of a future that seemed to grow more promising with each passing day. The evening breeze carried the smell of fresh earth and new growth, and somewhere in the distance, a whippoorwill called out to welcome the coming night. Tom found the newspaper clipping by accident, tucked inside one of the technical manuals Sarah had left behind. The headline caught his eye. "Tech CEO Sarah Chen opens up about rural roots family tragedy." The photo showed a younger Sarah standing Beside an elderly Chinese couple in front of a small farm, their faces bright with pride. His conscience battled briefly with curiosity before he began to read. The article was from 5 years ago, around the time he'd lost Catherine. As his eyes moved down the page, pieces began falling into place like autumn leaves settling on still water. Sarah's parents had been farmers in rural China, the article explained. They'd scraped together every penny to send their daughter to school in America. But unlike many success stories of immigrants who left their agricultural roots behind, Sarah had never forgotten. She'd built Chen's sustainable technologies with one goal, making farming viable for future generations. The tragedy mentioned in the headline came near the end of the article. Sarah's parents had lost their farm to a devastating drought, despite her attempts to help modernize their operations. The stress had contributed to her father's fatal heart attack. Her mother had passed away just months later. "I should have known you'd find that eventually." Tom startled at Sarah's voice. She stood in the doorway of his office, Lily dozing against her shoulder. He hadn't even heard their car arrive. "I'm sorry," he said, moving to return the article. "I shouldn't have pried." "No, keep it." Sarah settled into the chair across from his desk, shifting Lily to a more comfortable position. "It helps explain some things, doesn't it? Why this farm? Why you?" Tom nodded slowly. "Your parents' farm was about this size," she finished. "When I saw you with Lily that first day, the way you held her, you reminded me of my father. He had the same kind of hands, strong but gentle, shaped by working the land." She stroked Lily's hair softly. "I was too late to save their farm. The technology we have now, the solutions we've developed, they didn't exist then." The afternoon sun slanted through the window, catching the tears she quickly blinked away. "When you went down that well to save my daughter, you didn't just rescue her. You gave me a chance to honor my parents' memory, to prove that traditional farming wisdom and modern technology can work together, that neither has to be lost." Tom glanced at the 2 watches on his desk, past and future in perfect harmony. "Your father would be proud," he said quietly. "Not just of your success, but of how you're using it to help others." Sarah smiled, looking down at her sleeping daughter. "Sometimes I think Lily's developing more of her grandfather's farming instincts than my business sense. Did you know she cries if we try to leave before checking on the new seedlings?" "She's got good intuition," Tom chuckled. "Those seedlings need daily attention to take root properly." "Like all important things in life," Sarah agreed, standing carefully with her precious burden. At the door she paused. "Thank you, Tom, not just for saving Lily, but for helping me save something of my parents too." After they left, Tom sat for a long time with the article, thinking about the hidden currents that shaped their lives, like water shaping the land. Eventually, Emma found him there, her arms full of soil analysis printouts. "Everything okay, Dad?" He smiled, folding the article carefully and placing it in his desk drawer. "Just learning that sometimes the best crops come from seeds planted long ago, in fields far away." Outside his window, the sun was setting on rows of thriving corn, where old wisdom and new technology grew together toward tomorrow's harvest. The blueprint for the Community Agricultural Center held pride of place on the town hall bulletin board, its crisp blue lines and professional renderings drawing clusters of curious onlookers. Tom stood at the back of the monthly town meeting, watching his neighbors' reactions as Sarah presented their vision to the community. "The center will create 30 full-time jobs," she explained, her corporate polish softened by genuine enthusiasm. "But more importantly, it will provide free agricultural education and resources to every farmer in the county." Not everyone was convinced. Old Joe Maxwell, whose family had farmed the valley even longer than the Millers, stood up with a skeptical frown. "Sounds like you're trying to turn good farming land into some kind of fancy research station. What happens to our way of life?" Before Sarah could respond, Tom stepped forward. "Joe, remember when my father helped you redesign your irrigation system back in '82? Said sometimes you need new tools to keep old traditions alive? He gestured to the blueprint. "This is like that, just on a bigger scale." Emma, who had been manning the computer presentation, clicked to the next slide. "Look at these results from our test plots," she said, her voice clear and confident. "We've achieved a 40% increase in yield while using 30% less water, and that's just the beginning." A murmur of interest rippled through the crowd. In a farming community plagued by drought, those numbers spoke louder than any sales pitch. Tom noticed several younger farmers leaning forward, hope kindling in their eyes. Sarah had brought Lily to the meeting, and the baby's presence proved unexpectedly persuasive. She toddled among the farmers in her tiny overalls, charming even the staunchest skeptics. When she called out, "Corn!" while pointing at a projection of the demonstration fields, the tension in the room dissolved into warm chuckles. "My grandson's thinking about giving up farming," Betty Thompson said quietly, her weathered face troubled. "Says there's no future in it, but this might change his mind." After the meeting, a group of local farmers gathered around the miller's kitchen table, their coffee cups leaving rings on preliminary registration forms for the center's first training programs. The conversation flowed easier now, technical terms mixing with traditional farming wisdom, as naturally as different crops in the same field. "The best part," Tom explained, pulling up data on his new watch, "is that we can share information in real time. When someone finds a solution to a problem, everyone benefits." Sarah, who had been listening while helping Lily stack wooden blocks on the floor, added, "And we're not just preserving knowledge, we're building on it. Every farmer who participates adds to our understanding." Young Andy Peterson, who had been struggling to keep his family's farm afloat, cleared his throat. "My father wouldn't have approved of all this technology," he said slowly. "But my father never had to farm through a drought like this one." Tom understood the unspoken question in Andy's words. He'd been asking himself the same thing these past months. "Sometimes honoring tradition means helping it grow," he said, echoing Sarah's words from weeks ago. "Like a healthy crop, it needs both strong roots and room to reach for the sky." Later that evening, as the sunset painted the community center's construction site in shades of gold, Emma found her father standing by the old well that had started everything. "The registration forms are almost full," she said excitedly. "People are really coming around." Tom nodded, watching Lily play nearby under Sarah's watchful eye. The baby was carefully examining a grasshopper, her face filled with the same curiosity he saw in young farmers discovering new possibilities for their land. "Your mother used to say that the best farms grow more than just crops," he replied softly. Looks like she was right, as usual. Emma's college application sat on the kitchen table. The early admission form to Cornell's agricultural science program filled out in her neat handwriting. What caught Tom's eye wasn't the prestigious university's letterhead or the long list of his daughter's accomplishments. It was the letter of recommendation Sarah had written, which Emma had left for him to read. "In my 20 years of agricultural technology development," Sarah had written, "I have rarely encountered someone who so naturally bridges the gap between traditional farming wisdom and modern innovation. Emma Miller doesn't just understand agricultural science. She lives it, having grown up on land that has been in her family for generations." Her research on combining historical farming practices with cutting-edge technology demonstrates not just academic excellence, but a deep understanding of agriculture's past and future. Tom had to stop reading for a moment, his vision blurring. He remembered Emma at 5, sitting on his lap in the tractor, asking endless questions about why plants grew the way they did. Now here she was, about to take those questions to one of the best agricultural programs in the country. "Dad!" Emma stood in the doorway, nervous energy radiating from her. "What do you think?" He stood up, pulling his grandfather's watch from his pocket. "I think," he said carefully, "that it's time for this to have a new keeper." He held out the watch, its gold surface gleaming in the morning light. Your great-grandfather bought this to remind us that time moves forward. I can't think of anyone better to carry that message into the future." Emma's eyes widened. "But Dad, it's always been yours. And before that it was your grandfather's and his father's before him." He pressed it into her hands. "Each generation adds their own story to it. Now it's your turn." The moment was interrupted by familiar voices outside. Sarah's car had arrived, and Lily's excited chatter carried through the open window. The little girl had recently started forming complete sentences, and her favorite phrase had become, "Emma, show me!" As if on cue, Lily burst through the door and made a beeline for Emma. "Emma, show me the new flowers!" Sarah followed more sedately, catching sight of the college application on the table. "Ah, the big decision. Though I don't think it was much of a decision, was it?" Emma scooped up Lily, the watch now safely tucked in her pocket. "Cornell's agricultural program is amazing, and with the research we're doing here," she grinned, "I can't wait to share what we've learned about integrating traditional methods with new technology." "Speaking of which," Sarah said, pulling out her tablet, "the latest data from the test plots is remarkable. The combination of your father's crop rotation system with our soil monitoring technology is showing results that exceed all projections." Tom watched as his daughter shifted Lily to her hip and leaned in to examine the data, her free hand unconsciously fingering the watch in her pocket. The sight struck him suddenly. Past, present, and future, all wrapped up in one moment. Sarah must have noticed something in his expression. After Emma took Lily out to see the new wildflower meadow they'd planted as part of their bee sustainability project, she touched his arm gently. "She's not leaving the farm behind, Tom. She's helping it grow in new ways." He nodded, looking out at his fields where the evening sun gilded rows of thriving crops. Catherine would have loved this. Seeing Emma bloom, the farm transforming, even Lily turning into a proper little farmer. Sarah smiled, watching their daughters in the distance. Sometimes the best growth happens in ways we never expected. "When I first brought my technology to this farm, I thought I was just repaying a debt. Instead, I found—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Something that feels a lot like home." The word hung in the air between them, warm and full of possibility, like seeds waiting for the right moment to sprout. The storm warning notice arrived on Tom's new watch just as the sky turned an ominous shade of green. His grandfather would have recognized that color. It was the same threatening hue that had preceded the legendary hailstorm of 1962, the one that had nearly bankrupted the farm before his father's innovative crop insurance program saved them. "Emma," he called out, his voice carrying over the rising wind, "get the equipment under cover." His daughter was already moving, directing the research team to secure their sophisticated monitoring devices. The community center construction site was rapidly being battened down, tarps covering half-finished walls. Sarah's car appeared on the horizon, driving faster than usual. She'd been in a board meeting in the city when the warning came through, but somehow she'd made it back in record time. Lily wasn't with her, safely at home with her nanny, Tom hoped. "The Doppler radar shows it's going to be bad," she said, hurrying toward him. Her usual corporate composure was ruffled, both by concern and the strengthening wind. "But the automated irrigation system is already lowering water levels in the retention ponds to handle the rainfall." Thunder rolled across the darkening sky as they rushed to help Emma and the team. The experimental crops, their most promising research yet, lay exposed in the test plots. Months of work, innovative seed varieties, and carefully gathered data all stood in the storm's path. "The soil sensors are showing saturation levels approaching critical," Emma reported, her grandfather's watch gleaming on her wrist as she worked her tablet. "If we get the predicted rainfall—" A burst of hail interrupted her, marble-sized ice pellets rattling against the barn's metal roof. Sarah grabbed Emma's arm, pulling her to shelter, while Tom stood for a moment watching ice bounce off the tender shoots they'd nurtured so carefully. Inside the barn, now transformed into a high-tech command center, screens displayed real-time data from across the farm. The automated systems were responding as designed, but nature had a way of overwhelming even the best technology. The north field drainage isn't keeping up, one of Sarah's engineers reported, pointing to a flashing warning on his screen. The new seedlings, the old creek bed, Tom interrupted, his mind racing back to childhood lessons. Dad always said it was nature's drainage system. We just need to clear the blockage at the west end. He turned to Sarah. Your drones, can they... Already on it. Her fingers flew across her tablet, dispatching their agricultural drones to survey the area. Within moments, aerial footage showed the problem and a solution. The next hours passed. In a blur of activity, traditional farming knowledge merged with modern technology as they fought to protect their investment. Tom's understanding of the land's natural patterns combined with Sarah's advanced water management systems. Emma's research data helped them prioritize which fields needed immediate intervention. When the storm finally passed, they emerged to assess the damage. The hail had taken its toll on some crops, but the integrated drainage systems had prevented the devastating flooding they'd feared. The experimental plots, protected by automated covers, had survived largely intact. Look, Emma said softly, pointing to the western sky. A double rainbow arched over their fields, nature's own seal of approval on their efforts. Sarah stood close to Tom, both of them mud-splattered and exhausted. Your father's creek bed saved our research, she said. We had all this technology, but in the end, it took both, he finished. The old knowledge showing the way, the new tools helping us act in time. He smiled tiredly, kind of like us. The moment was interrupted by the sound of an approaching car. Sarah's security team arrived with Lily, who had apparently refused to sleep until she knew her farm family was safe. The little girl ran to them through the puddles, uncaring of her nice shoes. "Rainbow!" she exclaimed, pointing at the sky. Then, with the simple wisdom of childhood, "Everyone okay?" Tom lifted her up, sharing a look with Sarah. "Yeah, little farmer, everyone's okay, better than okay, actually." Because in facing this crisis together, they'd proven something important, that their partnership, like the seeds they'd planted, had taken strong root indeed. The first harvest after the storm exceeded everyone's expectations. Tom stood in the morning sunlight, holding a photograph that captured the moment perfectly. Emma proudly displaying their test plot yields, Sarah analyzing data on her tablet, and Lily, now almost 3, clutching a perfectly grown ear of their experimental drought-resistant corn. The success had made headlines in agricultural journals worldwide. "Dad!" Emma's voice carried across the field. "The Cornell acceptance letter is here." She ran toward him, waving an envelope, her grandfather's watch catching the light as she moved. Sarah's car was pulling up the drive behind her, Lily already squirming to get out of her car seat. The timing seemed perfect, as if the universe itself was coordinating events. Tom waited until everyone gathered around the kitchen table, their usual meeting spot for both celebrations and challenges. The acceptance letter lay unopened in the center, like a seed waiting to sprout. "Well," Sarah prompted gently, steadying, an excited Lily on her lap. "Aren't you going to open it?" Emma's hands trembled slightly as she broke the seal. Her eyes scanned the contents, growing wider with each line. I got in. Full scholarship." She looked up, tears gleaming. "They want to use our research as part of their sustainable farming program." The kitchen erupted in cheers. Lily, not quite understanding but catching the excitement, clapped her hands and shouted, "Emma, smart! Emma, help plants grow!" Tom pulled his daughter into a tight hug, his own eyes misting. "Your mother would be so proud," he whispered. The words caught in his throat as he felt Emma's tears dampen his shirt. Sarah watched them with a soft smile, then pulled out her tablet. "Actually, I have some news too." She pulled up an image of their latest soil analysis. The storm last month, it did something unexpected. The combination of natural drainage patterns and our automated systems created perfect conditions for soil regeneration. The test plots are showing unprecedented fertility levels. Tom leaned in to study the data, years of experience helping him grasp the implications. These readings, they're better than anything this land has produced in 3 generations. Exactly, Sarah said, her eyes bright with excitement. We're not just preserving traditional farming methods or implementing new technology. We're creating something entirely new, a perfect fusion of past and future. Emma was already pulling up additional data on her laptop. Look at these growth patterns. If we can replicate this across other farms... She paused, a new thought striking her. Dad, what if this becomes part of my research at Cornell? We could help other family farms make the same transition. Speaking of transitions, Sarah said, reaching into her briefcase, the community center is ready for its grand opening next month. I was hoping, she glanced at Tom, something warm in her expression. You might help me cut the ribbon. The question seemed to carry more weight than a simple ceremony request. Tom felt the familiar tick of both watches, his grandfather's. On Emma's wrist, the new one on his own, marking time for a future that suddenly seemed full of possibility. Lily chose that moment to climb into Tom's lap, her small hands patting his cheeks. "Grandpa Tom, happy?" she asked, using the name she'd started calling him recently, much to everyone's quiet joy. "Yeah, little farmer," he said, meeting Sarah's eyes over their daughter's head. "Grandpa Tom is very happy." The first harvest photo sat on the counter behind them, capturing the moment their separate worlds had truly begun to merge into something new and wonderful. Outside, the autumn sun painted the fields in shades of gold, while inside, a family born of crisis and courage celebrated the fruits of their shared labor, proving that sometimes the richest harvests grow from unexpected seeds. The partnership agreement lay on Tom's desk, its fresh ink glistening in the morning light. This wasn't the original contract that had started their journey. This was something new, something more. The document formally merged his generations of farming expertise with Sarah's technological innovation into a single entity, Chen Agricultural Solutions. "It's perfect," Sarah said, standing beside him with Lily drowsing against her shoulder. "Your practical wisdom, combined with our research capabilities. And plus," she added with a smile, "it gives Emma something substantial to come back to after Cornell." The mention of Cornell brought a proud gleam to Tom's eye. His daughter was leaving for university in just 2 weeks, her acceptance package now, including a research fellowship based on their successful fusion of traditional and modern farming methods. "Speaking of Emma," he said, "she left something for you." He handed Sarah an envelope he'd been keeping in his desk drawer. Inside was a hand-drawn card showing their 2 families together on the farm, Lily prominent in the foreground wearing miniature overalls. Sarah opened it, her breath catching as she read Emma's message. "Thank you for helping Dad save our farm, and for giving me a little sister I never knew I needed. Love, Emma." Lily stirred at her mother's sudden emotion, blinking sleepily. "Where Emma?" she asked, her newest concern being her beloved older sister's impending departure. "She's in the barn," Tom answered, showing the new interns around. The community center was already operational, drawing agricultural students and young farmers from across the country. Emma had taken naturally to the role of junior instructor, sharing her unique perspective on bridging farming traditions with modern innovation. They walked together toward the barn, now a state-of-the-art facility that somehow retained its rustic charm. The sound of Emma's voice carried through the open doors as she explained their integrated monitoring system to a group of attentive students. "See how the soil sensors work with the weather data. But it's not just about the technology," she was saying. "My dad taught me that you have to feel the earth too, understand its rhythms. The best farmers use both." Sarah squeezed Tom's hand as they listened. "She's amazing," she whispered. "Catherine would be so proud." The touch of their hands felt natural now, comfortable. like the way their separate lives had gradually grown together, taking root in shared ground. The newly signed partnership agreement was really just making official what they'd all known for months. They were better together than apart. Lily squirmed down from Sarah's arms and toddled over to the students, her presence drawing smiles. "Emma teaching," she announced proudly, causing gentle laughter. She'd become the unofficial mascot of their educational programs, her innocent enthusiasm for farming touching everyone who visited. Later that evening, after the interns had gone and Emma was packing for college in her room, Tom and Sarah sat on the porch swing. Lily was asleep inside, worn out from her day of helping around the farm. "I've been thinking," Sarah said softly, watching the sunset paint their fields in golden light. "The farmhouse is a bit small for all of us during my extended visits. Maybe it's time to discuss some renovations." The question held more than a practical suggestion. Tom turned to look at her, seeing in her eyes the same hope he'd been carrying in his heart. "Renovations would be good," he agreed carefully, "though we should probably discuss a more permanent arrangement first." Sarah's smile rivaled the setting sun. "I was hoping you'd say that. Lily already thinks of this as home, and I—" She paused, her hand finding his. "I can't imagine being anywhere else." From inside, they heard Emma exclaim over something she'd found while packing. The sound of their daughter's joy, the weight of Sarah's hand in his, the sight of their thriving fields. It all felt right, like the most natural harvest of all the seeds they'd planted together. The memory book lay open on the kitchen table, its pages displaying a photographic timeline of the farm's transformation. Sarah had created it as a going-away present for Emma, but tonight it served a different purpose. Tom and Sarah sat close together, Lily sleeping upstairs in what had once been Emma's childhood room, as they shared the stories that had shaped their lives. "This was the day we lost the farm," Sarah said softly, touching a faded photograph of her parents standing proudly in front of their fields in China. "The drought had lasted 3 years. The bank's decision came on my father's birthday." Her finger traced the edge of the image. "He passed away 2 weeks later." Tom covered her hand with his. "Catherine's last harvest was the smallest we'd ever had," he shared, turning to a page showing his late wife beside a struggling cornfield. "She kept apologizing, as if the drought was somehow her fault. Said she was leaving Emma and me with too heavy a burden. But look what grew from those painful times," Sarah said, flipping forward to recent photos. There was Emma presenting, their research at the State Agricultural Symposium, Lily helping to plant the first seedlings in the community garden, the ribbon-cutting ceremony for the education center where Tom and Sarah had stood together, their fingers intertwined just out of sight of the cameras. "Sometimes I think Catherine and my parents somehow arranged all this," Sarah whispered, leaning against Tom's shoulder, "bringing us together through Lily's rescue, giving us a chance to heal not just the land, but ourselves." "Emma said something similar last week," Tom replied, remembering his daughter's words as she packed for college. "She said Mom would have loved how you've helped make her sustainable farming dreams come true." Their conversation was interrupted by small footsteps on the stairs. Lily appeared in her favorite pajamas, the ones decorated with tiny tractors, clutching her stuffed cow. "Bad dream?" Sarah asked, opening her arms. Lily climbed into her mother's lap but reached for Tom's hand, holding it tight. "Story," she requested sleepily. "About the well?" It was her favorite bedtime tale now, though they kept the scarier parts vague. Tom began the familiar narrative, his voice soft in the quiet kitchen. "Once upon a time there was a brave little girl who helped bring 2 families together." Sarah joined in at the usual points, and soon Lily was drifting off again, secure in their shared embrace. They sat there for a while, their daughter sleeping between them, surrounded by photographs of their past and present. "I never thought I'd find this again," Sarah said finally. "A home, a family, a place where Lily can grow up understanding both her heritage and her future." Tom looked at the memory book, at the story it told of loss and renewal. of endings and beginnings. Catherine used to say that the best crops need both sunshine and rain to grow strong. He smiled at Sarah. I think the same is true for families. Lily stirred slightly, murmuring something about tractors in her sleep. Above them, the old farmhouse creaked gently, its sounds as familiar as a heartbeat. Outside, their merged fields, stretched under starlight, a testament to how love, like hope, could take root in the most unexpected places and transform entire landscapes, both of land and of heart. The wedding invitation, elegant yet simple, incorporated both Chinese and Western design elements. But what caught everyone's eye was the image embossed on the paper, a detailed sketch of the old well, now transformed into a beautiful wishing well feature in the farm's memorial garden, surrounded by Catherine's favorite flowers and decorated with symbols honoring Sarah's parents. Emma had come home from Cornell for the occasion, bringing with her news of how their farming innovations were being implemented in agricultural programs across the country. She stood now in the farmhouse kitchen, helping Lily practice her role as flower girl, while Sarah prepared breakfast, all of them still in their morning robes. Remember, sweetheart? Emma coached, watching Lily carefully scatter paper petals across the floor. Nice and slow, just like we practiced. Like planting seeds, Lily declared proudly, demonstrating her technique. At 4, she had developed a surprisingly sophisticated understanding of farming, combining Sarah's analytical mind with Tom's intuitive connection to the land. The screen door creaked open, and Tom entered, already dressed in his work clothes. Old habits died hard, and there were still morning chores to be done, wedding day or not. The cars are starting to arrive, he announced. Betty's already setting up the chairs in the north field. Sarah turned from the stove, and their eyes met in a look of shared joy and wonder. The north field, where their story had begun with a desperate rescue, would now host their wedding. The old well that had brought them together had been incorporated into the garden, where they would exchange their vows. Dad, Emma said softly, holding up his grandfather's watch, which she'd brought home specially for the occasion. I think you should wear this today. Tom took the watch, its familiar weight, comforting in his hand. Sarah stepped forward, touching its worn surface gently. And I have something to go with it, she said, retrieving a small box from the counter. Inside was the modern watch she'd given him when their partnership began, newly engraved with Chinese characters. It says 2 times become 1, she explained, her eyes misting slightly. Like our families, our traditions, our lives, Tom finished, drawing her close. Lily tugged at their clothes, demanding attention. Time for happy, she announced, using one of her favorite phrases. Emma scooped her up, all of them laughing, at her perfect timing. Later that day, as the autumn sun painted their fields gold, Tom and Sarah stood before their gathered loved ones. Emma, stunning in her maid-of-honor dress, held back happy tears. Lily scattered flower petals with farming precision, making sure each one had room to grow, as she explained to the delighted guests. Tom wore both watches, the old and the new, their different technologies marking time together just as their families' different traditions had found harmony. Sarah held a bouquet that included both Catherine's beloved wildflowers and lotus blossoms, representing her parents. And when they exchanged their vows, the gentle breeze carried the scent of ripening corn and fresh earth, the perfume of promises fulfilled and new ones just beginning to grow. 1 year later, the family gathered for a portrait in front of the renovated farmhouse. The photographer positioned them carefully, Tom and Sarah in the center, Lily perched on Tom's shoulders, and Emma home from Cornell, standing tall and proud beside them. The old well, now the centerpiece of a thriving memorial garden, provided the perfect backdrop. The Sarah Chen Agricultural Solutions sign gleamed in the morning sun, while behind it the community center bustled with activity. Young farmers from across the country came to learn the perfect balance of traditional wisdom and modern innovation that had made the farm a model for sustainable agriculture. "Daddy, look!" Lily called out, pointing to the experimental fields, where their newest drought-resistant corn grew tall and strong. At 5, she could already explain the basic principles of soil conservation to visiting students, though she still insisted on carrying her stuffed cow during her lectures. Emma adjusted her grandfather's watch on her wrist before checking data on her tablet. Her research at Cornell was revolutionizing farming practices, combining Tom's generational knowledge with Sarah's technological innovations. The results were spreading hope across drought-stricken regions worldwide. "Your mother would love this," Tom whispered to Emma as Sarah helped Lily down from his shoulders. "And your grandparents would be so proud," he added to his wife, who smiled and squeezed his hand in response. The photographer captured that perfect moment, the restored farmhouse behind them, the flourishing fields stretching to the horizon, and most importantly, the joy on their faces. A family brought together by fate, strengthened by challenge, and now growing together like the crops they tended. As the autumn breeze carried the sweet scent of ripening corn across their land, Tom's 2 watches ticked in harmony on his wrist. The old one still marked the passing of time, while the new one displayed readings from their advanced monitoring systems. Together, they symbolized everything the family had achieved, a perfect fusion of past and future, of tradition and innovation, of 2 separate stories becoming one. In the distance, a new group of agricultural students approached the community center, eager to learn. Lily waved to them excitedly, already moving to give her usual welcome tour. "Come see!" she called out. "Come see how everything grows better, together." And in those simple words, she captured the heart of their story, a tale of rescue and redemption, of loss and love, of 2 families becoming whole, and of hope taking root in fertile ground.